In this video I want to introduce quickly the limited region tool, very common and well-known tool, but if you're new to Lightwave then you might not know about it and you really will want to. It's very simple. All that the limited region tool does is to restrict your render to a limited region. Most commonly you're going to want to use this for proofing. So, here you are, you're doing a render and you're setting stuff up and it's complicated because it's got radiosity or it's got soft reflections and it takes a little while to resolve. And whilst you can mouse over certain areas in VPR to try and get those areas to, of course, resolve more quickly, there are, in certain situations like GI here, where a certain amount of pre-computation of the rest of the scene has to be taken into account as well. Obviously, that slows down your workflow, and when you're just trying to test render, it can be a bit of a pain. And often when you are test rendering, or you're trying to find how many reflection samples you need or whatever else, you'll often have the case where it's just a specific section of the image which is either the most noisy or is equivalent to the noise everywhere else, and you really just need to see a small chunk of it. And that's where limited region comes in. So you turn that on, and it gives you a region which you can adjust here just by dragging the corners of the region itself, and thus you can pick out just a little bit like this, and of course go ahead and render that, with the result being, of course, that it renders up an awful lot quicker. Makes it considerably easier when you are tinkering with settings that you want to try and get right, but you're not wanting to have to wait for an entire scene to render over and over and over. Of course, one way to get a quicker render when you are just wanting to, preview stuff whilst working is to use a lower resolution render, or of course a smaller window here in the case of VPR, but that doesn't give you the full resolution that you might want to be able to see, which of course limited region does. And not only does it work here in VPR, it also works of course when you go into F9, and so it will render out just that patch if you do an F9 render as well. Do of course be aware it will also do the same for an F10 render, so if you have used it, be sure to turn it off before you go doing any of your final rendering, otherwise you will be sad. So there we go, that is limited region. Very simple but very handy tool to have.